Hey everybody, Atypical, Josh Fleming from Atypical Life here. Well done, Josh. And here I am with Paddy Kingsland. Very nice to have you here.
Nice to be here.
Great stuff. Now, before we begin, I generally like to ask the interviewee to introduce themselves, maybe talk about some of the things they've done outside of Doctor Who for the viewers to get a better idea of who we're speaking to.
Yeah, I joined the Radiophonic Workshop in about 1970 and worked there for about 10 years. And then I left and went freelance and had a studio and been doing that ever since, although I now don't have that studio anymore because it's much better to just work at home, really.
Yeah, totally.
But they were, very good years. And so I started off at the workshop doing all sorts of theme tunes and stuff. And the first kind of biggish thing I did was a show called The Changes.
Yes.
Which was a children's TV production. Anna Hume adapted some books and produced the show, and it went down quite well at the time. But I think it's kind of lasted because it had a very ecological kind of theme to it. It's way ahead of its time. So that was Changes. And then years went by, and I got to work on The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was a radio show initially, and then went on to TV, and I did the music for the TV show. And around about that same time, they decided they wanted to change round things on Doctor Who. Previously, Dudley Simpson had written all the music for all the episodes of Doctor Who. He then started doing Blake 7, and so he obviously was doing an enormous amount of work. And they decided they wanted other people to have a go at this. And so Peter Howell and I, both at the workshop, made a kind of demo recording using adventures from which had already been finished and done.
Right.
And we got the tapes of those without the music on, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
And did sort of demo recordings of what we would have done if we were doing the music. And so John Nathan Turner and I suppose others listened to that and said, yeah, this is good. We like this. It's a bit more a different style, it's kind of pure electronic music as opposed to a lot of musicians and then a bit of electronic stuff on top, which is what Dudley's approach was.
Of course.
So that's what we did, and it was okay. And that's when we started to write music for the episodes.
Wonderful stuff. Because I was going to say, John Nathan Turner, when he came in, it seems like his mandate was to update everything about the show. Obviously, Peter Howell went on to make the new intro, if I remember rightly. Yes. The music just had a complete shift. I've been rewatching Tom Baker's later years recently on BritBox, and the music difference between that last season and the few seasons prior is vast, mainly because of the sound of it,
Yes, a lot. Yes, it's quite a big change, and we didn't try to sort of match in or anything. We just sort of did what we could do. And because what we could do was all on synthesizers, that of course made it very different from the approach that Dudley used to use, which was to record a band, not a very big band, but a band. And all his music seemed to be very much the same sort of tempo, although he could write he was very skilled. He could write across the beat and give the illusion of different tempos in a way, but we didn't do that. We had a system going where we could just do the music in any tempo that we wanted, depending on what the thing was. So I think that's a sort of one of the biggest musical differences that we arranged.
Was there any sort of, I don't know how it works from music producers, so please do fill me in, but was there any brief given to you about how, maybe from John Nathan Turner, maybe from the production team, the writers, Was there any brief given on how they wanted certain things to sound? Let's say for Logopolis, that's a very major story where the Fourth Doctor's leaving the show. Were you given any notes on that?
Always, the process was that you would go along, first of all, to a meeting in, not Television Centre, it was a place on Shepherd's Bush Green, which was a kind of BBC office building, and meet the director, and you sit in a room and just watch the show, and then every now and again you'd pause it. It would be on like a VHS machine. And so you'd kind of pause that and say, well, is that where, that'd be nice to have a piece of music there. Sometimes they wanted to paper over the cracks, if something wasn't very good.
Yeah.
or didn't work. So there's an element of repair work to do with the music, but mostly it was to heighten the kind of tension or, give a steer on something that might be just about to happen. So this, oh dear, something around the corner type stuff. And so you go through all that and come away with a tape, which had no sound effects on it either. It was just the dialogue as recorded. In those days, it was a mixture of TV studio and film.
Yeah.
So some of the things were heavily film, and some of them had very little in. And so that all got put together in an editing room, and it got put together in the way that was it. That was finished time-wise. So we were able to make the music fit to whatever was going on. And so yes, the answer to that is the directors were at that and had kind of clear ideas usually of where they wanted music. And then occasionally ideas came up at the same time. Oh. And at that meeting, Dick Mills came along because he was doing the sound effects.
Yes.
And we used to talk about, well, why don't you do this on just sound effects, or why don't we do this just on music, that sort of thing. So that was another part of it. So yeah, a lot of direction on that. But I think I don't remember the very early ones, but I think we, just perhaps in the early ones had a bit of, look, we'll play you with the sort of thing we're doing, and then we'll go from there, and they'd either say, that's crap or that's great, and we'd just go from
Great
there.
Stuff. I was going to ask, you've already answered my question there. So would it always be that you had the footage to work off, or sometimes would they just show you a script, story outline, and then you create a sound based on that, maybe? Because obviously those. Oh, great.
No, the system was you had the footage,
right?
You did the cues to that, and the next stage is you go along to a dubbing suite where all the bits of sound would be then overlaid onto the picture. Wow. And so that's what we did. And there's always massive arguments about the music's not loud enough. That's what we'd be saying. Somebody else would be saying the music's too loud. Then it would clash with the sound effects, and there'd be a kind of argument about that, which ended up usually with a compromise. And usually, sometimes it's better to play it on one or the other and not have a lot of distracting stuff fighting each other. But that's where those decisions were made.
Fantastic stuff.
I can remember going along to one dubbing session, not for Doctor Who, it's the Hitchhiker's Guide, and everybody was walking around in a spaceship, in the Heart of Gold, actually, was that one. And that was actually a set they had hired from Pinewood Studios, I think, and had been used for something in Star Wars, or one of those things. It was a huge, great wooden set, which looked brilliant. It wasn't, I think it may have been the Vogon. I can't remember which one it was. Anyway, but of course it sounded terrible when they were using the dialogue mic from the TV recording, because all the footsteps were on wood, which wasn't very convincing. So one of the guys there who was on the sound crew and myself, we went into the studio, got a couple of beer kegs from the BBC club and just walked on those in sync with the people walking to make it sound like, and with a bit of echo, it sounded as if they were walking around on a metal floor.
Fantastic.
That's completely irrelevant. You can cut it out.
No, that's fantastic. I love that. Would you often go in to do sound effects as well as the music? Would that happen very often?
Well, with Doctor Who, I did do the sound effects for one episode, one series, which was called The Sunmakers.
Yes.
And Dick Mills was on holiday, and so they had to get other people to cover what he would have been doing. So I did that one, and so that. But apart from that, no, this was just something we did on the day, you know, because it was suddenly noticed that they hadn't really covered that.
I always love that idea from behind the scenes, because working on little bits and bobs here myself, never in the sound department, unfortunately, but there is a sense of cobbling things together. If someone's available, just do it. Just get something fixed, you know?
That's the way it always works, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, however well planned the whole thing is at the beginning, things crop up, you know, in sound and vision, you know, sound always gets left to the end. It's slightly the poor relation. And by the time you get to the sound, this is not so much the case when working on Doctor Who, because that was very kind of rigid. There was a schedule and that was that. But in later productions, you find that they have a budget, and because the sound is at the end, they've run out of money on location catering and stuff by the time they get to the sound. So it's very much the end of the process.
Oh no. Oh, wonderful stuff. So with I'll very briefly veto out Doctor Who for just a second, because when I was doing some research, I found a couple of credits on your IMDb that I wish to ask about briefly. So you did some of the sounds Paranormal Activity, is that right?
What, sorry?
Paranormal Activity.
That doesn't ring a bell.
Right. I may have looked at the wrong IMDb. That's absolutely fine. Just thought it was worth a quick ask.
No, I don't recollect that. Maybe they used something of mine. Because when I left the BBC, I did a lot of library music, which gets picked up. And the idea of library music, or production music, as the Americans call it, is you do make an album of music, usually in a certain theme, you know, certain kind of area, and then the people in its stock music, if you like, that people can use, and it's very easy for them to get the rights, and you know, without any hassles. Because if you use commercial music, you know, something off, you know, a commercial record, there's always a kind of big problem with getting all that sorted out. And so the library stuff is just there for. I mean, for instance, there's a thing called Stranger Things at the moment.
Yes.
With a bit of my stuff on there. Which got picked up off a library, but it's not something I did for them. They just picked that up because they obviously had a gap they needed to fill at the time.
And for stuff with that, would you be consulted on that, or is it just sort of public domain kind of stuff? If you see what I'm saying,
it certainly is in public domain. It's you can get a license to use it. That's what happens. So, but that is, you put your finger on it almost, that it is, it's easy to clear the thing, and I can't stop them using it. And I was talking to one of the other guys who wrote a lot of that a while ago, and he said I have to give away those rights so that if somebody wants to use it on a cigarette commercial or a commercial for Kalashnikovs, which I don't approve of, I can't say no, because, you know, he said, I don't want that to happen, but because that's meant to be easy to clear, they have to get those rights off you. That's not to say that the publishing company wouldn't just refuse that. They may well do that, of course. But what it means is that you really don't want to have to phone somebody up every time somebody wants to use something, because they simply would stop using it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow. The other credit on there, and I don't know about this at all. Again, shoot this down if it's not true, but as a 90s kid, I need to ask. It says you did something to do with SpongeBob, or maybe some of your stuff was used in SpongeBob?
That's exactly it. It's the same thing. Yes, that's right. So I didn't have anything to do with that. They just picked it up and used it. And so there's bits and pieces all over the place that get used. Now, of course, that was after I'd left the BBC and I was working for EMI, I think it was EMI and KPM, those sort of library people.
Wow.
Good fun.
It sounds it.
Somebody's ringing me and I'm just going to...
Don't worry about that.
Turn that on. Let's just turn that on. Right, there we go.
No worries. None at all. Back to what you did in Doctor Who. Would this be your first credit if I say this right? I don't. If you don't know, don't worry. But it says here the first one you composed was the episode Meglos.
That wasn't the first one I wrote, because I had just finished doing something else, and I can't remember whether it was I don't know, Full Circle, something like that.
Full Circle's down on here too, yeah.
I've got a list down here and some sort of dates on it, because they didn't get transmitted in the same order that we got given them to do. And what happened and I can remember this clearly because I had just finished doing a series of 4, and Peter Howell was ill and couldn't face doing the first episode of Meglos. It was scheduled in for the week after I'd finished doing this other thing. And they said, can you do the first episode? And then Peter will carry on after that. So I did do that. And it may well have been the first one that went out. I'm not sure. But it wasn't the first one I wrote. Bit pedantic, all that. But
not at all. So Full Circle was your first one, was
it? Probably. Yeah, I think it probably was.
I'm trying to look down here myself.
There was a theme in that for Gallifrey I wrote. It had the Marshmen and
terrifying stuff when I was growing up.
Who's the director of that? Oh, Peter Grimwade, that's right.
Yes.
Directed that one. So I've got a crib sheet here with the dates on because I can't really remember.
That's
the
fun.
Order of things. It's quite a long time ago.
No, of course, I completely appreciate that. With that series as well, just generally as you get further along, it gets darker. It gets more how to say it? It's a bit more serious than say the latest stuff Dudley Simpson did, and I think that is reflected in the music. I imagine that again came from a creative decision, because there's episodes of vampires and stuff like that, in the terms of State of Decay.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of those sort of things in it, and the sort of medieval things with all sorts of strange, superstitious people in it, and all of that. And I'm sure that John Nathan Turner had a big turnaround in the approach people were using. I think Doctor Who could be quite jokey in the earlier days, sometimes, and a bit sort of bit of slapstick almost going on. But it became much more dramatic later on. And then, of course, in the very latest, incarnation that you were talking about earlier, really quite sort of full on. And I think that in the days when we were doing it, they were sort of realizing that children wanted dark stuff, and weren't damaged by it or anything like that, and realized that it was okay to do that where there may have been a bit of a kind of, oh, let's keep it, you know, don't make it too sort of frightening. That sort of
Absolutely. And then at that time you had people, I know especially later on in the 80s, so this is a bit after your time on the show, they started getting an awful lot of complaints about the violence and what have you. But certainly in that early 80s time frame, I think it was just right in terms of how far they pushed it, you know?
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's meant to be entertaining.
Yeah.
And for quite a broad range of ages and people, you know, as well.
Absolutely. So we get out of it. So I've got State of Decay. State of Decay was the one after that, and then you didn't do Keeper of Tarkan, but you did come back and do Logopolis.
Logopolis, yeah, no, that was great. That was really a nice one to do. It's written by Peter Grimwade, and I don't know. No, did he write it? I think no, he directed that one.
Yes, so, I think off the top of my head, someone called Christopher Bidney did it. Is that right?
That's right. Yes, he was the writer, and then of course Peter Grimwade directed it. And yeah, and there's a nice sort of end sequence which I liked in that.
Yeah,
which is quite sort of nice. Of course, you know, it's a historic sort of moment in Doctor Who land, isn't it?
Yeah.
With one guy who was arguably the most, you know, of all the Doctor Who's, the most sort of theatrical.
Yeah.
Handing over to somebody completely kind of with a different approach entirely.
Did you feel?
You know, it was amazing to be doing that, and I was doing the Hitchhiker's Guide at the same time. I remember we were in one of those dubbing sessions for the Hitchhiker's Guide, and they were shooting Logopolis downstairs in the studio downstairs.
Wow.
And Barbara, not Barbara Dickinson, what's her name? Angela, is it? What is her name?
Angela?
No. She was in the Hitchhiker's Guide as Trillian.
The name
Sandra Dickinson.
There we are.
She was. She came along, I think, with Peter Davison probably, because they were married, and so she dropped in to see the director into the dubbing place that we were in, and said that Peter was downstairs in tons of makeup, shooting that scene where he sort of emerges from being the Watcher.
Yeah.
And that's what they were doing that day. But I was amazed and very honoured, really, that I was doing both of those shows.
Yeah.
At the same time.
That's an incredible achievement.
Well, I guess it's just luck, really, being in the right place at the right time.
Oh yeah. I guess this goes without saying, but did you feel the pressure of doing a theme for an episode that was going to bring an end to the Fourth Doctor's era? Did that play on your mind at all, making it now?
I don't think I even appreciated what was going on until the end, because we didn't have the same sort of sense of how lasting all this stuff was going to be. We were in a world then where you made a show and it went out, and hopefully the set didn't collapse and you didn't sort of fall over or play it at the wrong speed or something like that. But basically it went out on the air, maybe get repeated next year or, you know, a bit later. But that was it. Very ephemeral, really, just not stuff that would go on and on. And so if we had known that, we probably would have frozen.
Yes, absolutely.
So at the time, we were working on something which was great and fun to work with. And, you know, we were professional, wanted to make it as good as we could in the time. And that's another point about all that, you know. If you have a deadline, which we certainly did, and it had to be done by then, it wasn't like, oh, could we spend another, you know, there was no sort of negotiation about that.
I can imagine.
Unless something went wrong yes, obviously things, you know, but just in the general run of things, it was a sausage machine. You know, you had to sort of somebody else was waiting to do the next one, and all
Right.
that going on. You see, so. But having that deadline meant that you got on with it and did it. Whereas if they'd said, look, it's July, August maybe, you know, you wouldn't have done a thing, you know, just always at the end. So it's very nice to have a structure and a deadline.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much more. I guess in fear and hurry, you create your best stuff sometimes. I certainly find that as a writer, that's what I'm doing right now myself.
At the last minute. Yeah, I mean, anybody doing this, as you know, have the same sort of.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Next down on the list, episode-wise, you actually did the very next episode. You did Castrovala as well.
Yes, probably not straight afterwards. May have even been before. I don't have my schedule here, but that was transmitted afterwards. But I think I may have, recorded it out of order, perhaps.
Yes.
And yes, that was a nice one. That was Fiona Cummings was the director on that one. And that was in 82.
Yeah.
1982. And I had left the BBC, I think, by then, didn't I? Yeah, probably. It was transmitted in 82. I mean, when I recorded it, I was probably at my studio by then.
Wow.
Because I was carrying on. I did a couple of adventures outside the BBC. So, that was a Visitation as well. Was another one. Oh, no. Mordwyn.
Yeah, Mordwyn Undead and Frontios, is that right? I think I've seen
Yes, that's right.
on that, yeah.
Yes, that is right. Yes, no, I mean, Castrovala and the Visitation were both done at the workshop.
Right, wow.
That. Yeah, I'm looking at these dates, and what I've got is transmission dates, so of course it doesn't relate to when I was actually doing them.
No, of course. It's
yeah.
I was going to say it was good from a viewer's standpoint, at least. This is what I think. It was very good to have the sound continuity between Logopolis and Castrovala, because especially when I was young, I watched them back to back, and you could tell they were part of the same story, even though the main character had completely changed. You could just tell it was a continuation of that story, you know?
Yes, that's right. And I don't know if that was done deliberately or not. It may well have happened that way. But they were, great days. I mean, Peter Moffat was most wonderful, a director to work with. Very old school, very experienced, and had worked in drama series for years. I mean, before that, most of that sort of team had worked on those series about the country vet. All Creatures Great and Small.
That's the one.
A lot of Peter Davison came from that end of the thing. But Peter Moffat had worked in all kinds of wonderful shows before that. And he did work on things like, I think, Coronation Street, and those sorts of things. And originally, those things were live, they're actually really live. People running back. And and he said there was a period where they recorded it on tape, but they would not edit the tape because it was too expensive.
Yeah.
And he said, well, so what might happen was if you do something live and the set would collapse, or somebody dry up, and there'd be a sort of terrible kind of moment. And they were pretty good at covering things up. But, there's definitely something went badly wrong. And he said it was all right because you were in the gallery directing it. It went wrong. It was being transmitted. There's nothing you could do. And you got home and had a whiskey and thought, well, you win some, you lose some. He said, but then came that dreadful time when they were recording it on videotape, which they would not edit. Yeah. So you knew when you'd done that and come to the end and something ghastly had sort of gone wrong in the middle, that you had to wait 3 weeks before everybody would see this disaster going out. And he said that was a bit, it was much better when you could edit.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, during the Doctor Who time, you know, with all those things, they edited it very heavily. You know, there's lots of editing going on, lots of visual effects and all that were coming in. Even though it was all done on mechanical machines, it was still, you know, getting there.
I remember there was an interview that Peter Moffat did probably about 10 years ago now, and he said he was doing the five Doctors, the 20th anniversary special, and he said there were so many effects. I don't know what a green screen is. What is all of this? Bless him. He seemed like a lovely man. He really did.
No, he was lovely, and I do remember him saying something similar once to that. He said, "Why can't we have the old-fashioned things like glass shots?" And there is a thing called a glass shot where they paint something very ornate, like a ceiling or a cathedral or something, which they hold in front of a still, a locked-off camera, and it looks to all the world in a studio as if you're in this marvelous sort of building, and it's a very simple effect.
Yeah.
There's a few of those around, because once again, going back to the Hitchhiker's Guide, there was a Starship Heart of Gold. No, it was one. Which spaceship? It was a spaceship, and you looked at the shot, and it was at the top. It was a huge spaceship at the top of a hill, perched just on the top, and it looked great. And the director said, "What do you think of that?" I said, "It's amazing. But how did you do that?" He said, "Well, we had a board, which we just set the camera up so we had the top of the mountain there. And then we had a board which was 4 foot in front of the camera, and that had the spaceship on. Yeah. It was lined up so it looked as though it was sitting on the top of the hill. It works, but you can't move the camera, otherwise it's given away."
It sounds like that's the inspiration. Amazing. It sounds like that's the inspiration for a new technology that they're trying out with some of the Star Wars Disney shows right now, where they're basically projecting sets, which sounds incredible. I don't know how that's going to look, but they're basically using images of set, let's say in Star Wars, you have sand planets like Tatooine and stuff like that. They're just going to project them in a studio, and it will just look like they're on location. That sounds really cool.
Yes. I mean, rather than sort of superimposing them electronically, they'll project them. Yeah. I suppose that makes it easier for them to walk around and follow the actors and have everything in perspective.
Absolutely. I hope it works out, because that'll be great.
Tough for the lighting people, but I'm sure they'll work that out.
Oh, no, that sounds great. But with the final, I say final 3, but you may have done more than this, but I've got after Castrovala, you did 3 more stories in the 5th Doctor's era. Is that right?
As far as I know, my last one was Frontios.
Yes, that's what I've got down here,
Yeah. Visitation, Mordwyn and Frontios, I think, were the last 3. Yeah.
Very interesting stories in terms of themes on all of them.
Yes. Yeah, I know. They had in Mordwyn, they brought back the Brigadier, didn't they?
Yes.
That was the thing. And it was Peter Davison one, obviously. It was after the changeover. And then I can't remember when Nyssa came into the picture, but it may have been Castrovala. I'm not quite sure.
It was one of her first stories, if not her first.
I did a theme for her there because she was homesick and wanted to go back.
That's great.
So, and Frontios, what was that one about? Oh, they had these tractators.
Yeah. It's a mining planet, and then they've got ginormous slugs of some kind, or dung beetles, something like that.
Yeah, yes. All very horrible. But no, that was the end of that. And they went on and got lots of other freelance people in after that to do music.
Yeah.
And I was doing all sorts of other things. I worked on the Michael Palin series, Around the World in 80 Days and Pole to Pole after that. So there was busy times. Lovely.
Wow. Absolutely. I'm trying to think, like, later, you had very varied music after the Fifth Doctor went. Like, there's some, and it's not a criticism on anyone who did it. Some of the music fit really well. And then there was some that sounded a bit more like, I would say, like party music almost. So especially by the late 80s, you had very like techno-y type music for everything. I don't know if that was a decision
K9, taking the mickey out of K9, I suppose that was.
The K9 theme was really good.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I did a few of those things because I was quite a fan of all the American pop show music, so I thought I'd try and do something a bit like that. And we had just got a drum machine too, so that was quite a toy that was being played with. So it was fun. Hopefully it came off and it gave a bit of variety to it, but you never know, do you? Taking a risk always.
See, I think you were definitely the first person, but I think you might be the only person to have composed a theme for K9. So that's an interesting distinction, considering how long he's been in the show, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if K9's still around, is he, in the new ones?
He's not in the show. He got his own spin-off for a few years, but it didn't do too well, unfortunately. So the character's been retired for now.
Yes. K9.
Oh, I can imagine some set stories about that. Apparently, it's very hard to control him.
Yes, I wasn't really there for the recordings of the visuals, so I don't know. But Dick Mills would be the guy to ask about all that, because he very often went along to the recordings,
right,
to see what was what was intended with a model or something before he had to do it, so he could go back and play about with it in advance, if you see what I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas I would wait until I got the tape finished, because otherwise your timings would be, because everything's recorded in bits, you would never get an idea of how it all fit together,
Dick Mills is very interesting. He's voiced a Dalek before, he's done so much for the show. He's done all kinds of bits and bobs, and he was there for a very long time. I don't know when he left.
Well, I think probably about sort of 90s, that sort of decade when he stopped doing it. Yeah, but he had been there since 1956, I think, 58.
Now that's a legacy. Wow. And the last question I've got down here is one of my friends really wanted to be here today, but they couldn't. So I've been asked to pass this on. Of all the Doctor Who compositions you did you have a particular favourite listening back at all that you did?
I don't know. I did. I think Logopolis I like. The end of Logopolis, perhaps. I like that. And the Visitation.
Yes, very dramatic. I really like that.
So it's quite dark and quite sort of has an atmosphere to it. But yes, those two. Yeah, absolutely. I think.
Yes. Yeah. My personal favourite's Logopolis. I really enjoy that because that sticks out to me from when I was very young, watching it on VHS.
Well, yes, it would. It's quite an emotional kind of thing. Of sort of the end of Tom Baker, beginning of Peter Davison, and Tom Baker was a great Doctor Who because so distinctive looking and performance and all that, and I think, but everybody has their own favourite, I suppose.
Of course. I think unanimously, though, a lot of people see Tom Baker as the Doctor. So, there's a certain iconography about that.
Yes, that's right.
Absolutely.
Yes, I mean, it's a bit like Back to the Future. Could you imagine it with that Christopher, what's his name, doing it?
Oh, no, you could not.
No. Yeah.
Matthew Broderick or the person who played Doc Brown, whose name escapes me.
Yeah, Chris. Anyway, look it up online.
Yeah.
Everything's online.
Absolutely. Speaking of online, before I wrap this up, I usually ask if there's anything my interviewees want to promote or any websites they can go to follow you. Is there anything you'd like to promote to the viewers whilst you're here?
Very nice of you to say that. I do have a website, which is paddykingsland.com. So there's a couple of bits and pieces might be interesting on there. But also, we mentioned the changes earlier on. Well, on the changes, I had sitar music going on, and the sitar was played by a friend of mine for many years called Nick Gom. And over the last couple of years, we've made an album, which is called Listen for the Light, and it's electronics and sitar, or rather sitar and electronics, if you like. And so that's out there at the moment on Spotify, Apple Music, all those platforms.
Wow.
So if you look up Listen for the Light, Nick Gom, and me, but Nick Gom is first because he's the sitar player. And so that's on. And one idea we haven't got it done yet, is to do a limited edition vinyl version of that. So that's a plug for that, if you like.
Fantastic. I'll put the links to all of these in the description, guys. So when you're done watching this video, please go and visit. That'll be wonderful.
Yes, lovely. You can find the sort of details on the paddykingsland.com website as well.
Great stuff.
Those things. There's also a link to a thing we did, the remaining members of the workshop, that we normally do gigs, but we haven't been able to, obviously, for a while.
Yeah.
And so I hope we'll be going back to doing those. But we did an online kind of show, which was called Latency, and that's on there. So that might be an interesting thing.
Wonderful. If you are ever up in Liverpool, please let me know. That sounds wonderful.
Yes, thank you. I will do.
Oh, thank you.
We did go to Liverpool once and do a concert many years ago.
Wonderful.
So, thank you for having me. It was really a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
And really, thank you for coming on. This has been a great experience for me because, as I said, I've had a lot of directors, producers, and writers type people on. But hearing about this side of the creative process is fascinating to me. So this has been wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
See you all very soon in the next interview. Bye-bye.
Okay.